August 3rd, 2010, survival multiplayer released for Minecraft Alpha. And just 9 days later, the ban command followed. As long as multiplayer is around, there will always be ways to ruin your friendships. And this is the history of those Minecraft pranks. Starting with this one, where Big Pete shows off a simple house that invites you in. It's even got a sign saying it's not a trap. It has to be safe. But inside, disaster strikes, as you walk over a pressure plate, causing a chain reaction to TNT all the way down to bedrock to blast off. Which, if we did this nowadays, it would be pretty deadly. But due to server bugs, neither the TNT nor the fall left the victim with anything less than a full life bar, and apparently a hole to the void. Weird. And while that prank might have been one of the first ever on YouTube, this video started the time-honored tradition of posting your friend's bad day after a prank. Here, the prank's even simpler. Distract your friend in chat while your accomplice goes and fills up their house with TNT, which is kinda cruel, but luckily Velvet Horror left a comment under the video letting you know it's all in good fun. And I would hope so, considering the server's called the Companion Project. And on October 25th, we finally had a prank that didn't end up with your house turned into a crater. See, the idea behind this prank was that in Alpha, you could stack up signs to 64, which is a far cry from the 16 that we're used to today. And with all those signs, Bucker2012 and their friends took their friend's AFK house and filled it to the brim with vulgar jokes, references to CNNer's old Minecraft Let's Play, and lots of rafflecopters. What gets me about this is that if you read the comments on the video, it seems like the viewers had their time wasted more than the original poster's friend. I guess Minecraft videos have always taken too long to get to the point. Minecraft's code might be built on popsicle sticks in a dream, but as is tradition, players know how to turn those dreams into gameplay. Since all the way back in Alpha, Durkaz found a way to cause a Minecraft player to crash, albeit unexpectedly. They did this by sending them on an inconspicuous roller coaster ride, because once the minecart touched fire, the game didn't know how to handle the interaction. So instead, it kicked the rider from the server, which you might expect your friend to kill you with a roller coaster, but you're probably not expecting it to kill your Minecraft instance entirely. Before Minecoins were added to Bedrock Edition, they were actually an April Fool's joke first. Since in 2011, Mojang released the first ever April Fool's snapshot. This one adding loot chests that could only be opened by following a joke link to pay real-world money for in-game rewards. Luckily, Minecraft's never actually been pay to win, but when Bedrock Edition added in the marketplace, it did give some older Minecraft players some scary flashbacks. Back in the day, sand was the pinnacle of Minecraft trap technology. Since it was one of the few gravity-affected blocks, it was one of the most unique ones to use at the time. And so in a 21-minute video, Ethos Lab explored the various ways you could use sand to trap and prank your friends in Minecraft. One of the more popular methods was using signs to hold up your sand. And then by having a pressure plate on TNT to break the attached signs, you could then drop the player into an explosion. It's so historic that it was even highlighted in Green's Past Life series. Back in beta, when we didn't have skulk sensors or comparators, you had to get pretty creative. But sometimes that meant doing things so basic that no one even expected it. And so this Minecrafter had a prank where they asked someone to pose for a picture on a peaceful server, which seems like a reasonable request. And then while they were standing still to type back their response, they would just break the block underneath them, causing them to fall into the hole that they dug earlier. Making an annoying sound machine might seem like a timeless prank, but Vintage Beef on Mindcrack was one of the first ever to show it off on YouTube. And it was Vintage Beef's Prank Wars series that became the blueprint for a lot of creators' future content. And so in the first episode, another server member, Dave, hid a series of redstone clocks under Beef's floor, and then attached those clocks to note blocks and doors. Making noises to keep your friend up at 3 AM? That's never going out of style. For the longest time, sand was the only example of a moving block. But in 2011, Mojang added in the piston, which was inspired by modded Minecraft, and then every block became movable, which in a way meant that every block became prankable. And as such, DocM77 then gave an in-depth tutorial in one of the first ever piston trap doors. And while the use for it wasn't necessarily always for a prank or trap, DocM had given the community the car keys to go and drive this thing off a cliff. And as we've no doubt shown off on this channel, a flush piston door is the building block for a lot of good traps. No one likes loiterers, and no one likes when those loiterers are made of obsidian. So when Pause on Mindcrack unleashed a horde of obsidian men onto BBelle, it was a recipe for disaster and a pretty funny prank, since all he did was collect an inordinate amount of obsidian and then stack them up in golem-like pillars around B-Dub's base, which considering back then enchantments were a lot more difficult to obtain, the process of getting rid of these golems is going to be a lot more difficult than it would be today. And considering nowadays we actually have ways to farm obsidian, maybe these obsidian men golems are actually still a good option. Just saying, who wouldn't want to mine these diamonds? Well, hopefully not you, considering this next prank is a little psychological. Here, GDPK used diamond ore and then placed them above some lava. That way any passerby wouldn't be able to resist mining it up, before of course falling in, which I think is funny to see because it wasn't always common knowledge to never dig straight down. A few unlucky souls had to learn that the hard way, and considering there's no netherite lava immunity in this version, there wasn't really even a safe way to get out of this mess, definitely earning its classic status. Here you can see that Etho took the noise machine from earlier and took it up to a way different level, considering that he took advantage of fire spread mechanics to make a fuse out of leaves netherrack, and so each leaf would randomly burn and ignite the subsequent netherrack, but also an adjacent TNT TNT placed in water. So depending on how long it took for the fire to spread and how often you place the TNT, you could make a completely randomized TNT noise machine without any redstone. Which, considering we weren't farming redstone with witches in the past, being able to make something like this on the cheap was pretty nice. If sand was already such an important block for building traps, and when Mojang released anvils, it created an entirely new era in Minecraft pranking. And again, we can see that Dawkins was on the forefront of showing off just how you could be an evil mad scientist, considering that he put together a new machine, the Anvil Cannon, which this made use of the anvil's gravity with TNT explosions to precisely launch an anvil to a forward location, making for one of the scariest things to be on the receiving end in 2012. Not many mobs in Minecraft will place blocks, and even less are able to infinitely generate them, which is why snow golems provided a great new opportunity for a new prank. And as we can see here by Rage Plays Games, they placed around several of these around their friend's base, letting them cover it up entirely with snow layers. And the setup was super simple, all you had to do was place down the golems and then walk away. But now in later versions, this prank became even more viable, considering that we can combine the snow layers with a set of leads to then paint your target's build with a thick layer of snow. Meaning we could turn your friend's world into a winter wonderland just like that. They just might also have to get used to shoveling a bit of snow. The release of anvils to Minecraft became the driving force for a new community invention, Skynet. Yeah, it's not what I had in mind, but hear it out. Since the idea here would be that you would make pillars and sky bridges throughout the server, and then just wait for the opportunity to one-shot someone with an anvil drop. And we can see here that Ibby20 was one of the first ever to document this phenomenon by just using one inconspicuous dirt pillar. It's been over a decade since then, and players are still making Skynets to jump scare their friends, so don't forget to look up. By now, Minecraft had become famous for its prank war, and it was still going strong. This time, the prank was on the viewers, when the server owner Good Boulderfist introduced the newest player and supreme leader of Minecraft, Seth Bling, who then declared that Minecraft would forever be in creative mode and operating on the new Minecraft 2.0 snapshot, which offered many beloved features like the TNT Ethos Lab, retextured pigs as horses, and the pink friendly wither. It definitely gave viewers at the time a bit of a scare, especially when they said that invitations were open for the server, which, speaking candidly, I remember calling my friend and trying to get on the server just because of that, without checking that the day was April Fool's. But hey, at least one thing was true, Seth Bling did actually join the server, just not on that day. Well, that friend that likes to run around and steal your stuff, getting their grubby hands on any kind of off-camera mining that we did. So what if we capitalized on that? And as Mr. Crayfish showed off, here's the way to implement the newly added trap chest into our pranks. And because players weren't yet accustomed to looking for the little bloody nose underneath the trap chest lock, that meant that this inconspicuous house could be the easy trap for our favorite sand pitfall, which is now the reason that none of us have this trust in a chest anymore. Most players know about the Dinnerbone Easter egg that turns a mob upside down, but who knew that one of the first players to ever flip an entire house upside down was Dinnerbone himself? On Minecraft, Dinnerbone, a Minecraft developer, but also a member of the server, made a block-for-block recreation of BBelle's house flipped entirely on its head, which, considering that upside-down stairs had only been added a year prior, and Dinnerbone's famous Easter egg was only added a few months before the video, those likely set the stage to get one of the biggest reactions in Minecraft history. Falling from a tall height is one of the fastest ways to travel in Minecraft, and so every mineshaft and skyscraper on the server usually has some form of water drop, because really, who wants to climb a ladder? But Opposed Dude took advantage of that, using a new feature at the time, stained glass, and they covered up the water of the drop shaft with a stained glass dyed blue, which, considering the blue of the water and the blue glass blended together, especially when water looked a lot more blue before the update Aquatic in 1.13, any player that reflexively took their drop shaft would instead land on the glass and splatter on the ground, all for the price of a glass and a lapis. The update Aquatic evolved the community's water shafts even further, so of course it evolved the pranks as well, and now we could find the bubble elevator in any friend's base, most likely find it next to the water drop in their mine shaft, but instead of trapping the drop chute, you could place something like lava at the top of the elevator, and then the player will be repeatedly pushed by the bubbles into the dot of lava at the top. Just make sure that you blocked off the elevator exit with some kind of obsidian. After all, every good prank is inescapable and completely destroys your friend's items. Even after Minecraft had closed, players like Green on Hermitcraft seemingly inherited the prank war, and one of the early favorites was when Green popularized the idea of the Infinity Room, which was a strange blank white room where it was difficult to tell where you even were. And the way that this worked was by building a large white concrete platform and then using a map to capture the blank slate. Then by putting that map in an item frame and that item frame on some kind of sea lantern or glowstone, you'd get a fully lit, fully blank white texture that covered an entire block. And so Green built an entire room out of these item frames to disorient his friends and create some secret hideouts. When the Village and Pillage update released in 1.14, Mojang invented drive-bys, since by acquiring the bad omen effect from a patrol captain, you could run a drive-by on any village, man-made or not, and cause the whole thing to start up a raid even if you were just bailing. And so if you wanted to occupy your friend's time with an unexpected fight for his mending villager, this is a good method of distraction. And funnily, history actually proved that these drive-bys got even easier, considering that in 1.21, 2021 with the release of the Bad Omen bottles, they let you initiate a drive-by only when you wanted to and never accidentally happening on yourself. If there's one thing true in life, rent's expensive and lying to your friends is cheap. And so Green showed off that idea perfectly with the idea of installing secret rooms in your friends' bases. And here the concept is super simple. Try to find a place where you could hide an entire extra room, and so the longer the server lasts, the bigger the payoff will be when your friend finally finds it. Who knows, maybe it's kind of comforting to know you had their back the whole time. You were just watching it a little closer than they would have liked. There's not really a good way to die, but drowning can't be one of the better ones. But on an unrelated note, that's why we can try this prank on your friends. Taking after a user cow is bad, we could find ourselves doing this prank by using the Frostwalker treasure enchantment. Because it lets you temporarily freeze and walk on water, that also means that we can trap our friends beneath the ice. All we have to do is just wait for them to swim in the water, and then when they're in the drink, that's your chance to equip your boots. And as long as you move around to keep them from escaping, it's a pretty surefire way to get the job done. And what's worse than a painful slow death by drowning? Annoying someone with free glass. Since Etho and Hermitcraft this time showed off another new direction in prankology. Since with the discovery that light gray stained glass panes were nearly invisible when placed in a chest, Etho then kindly distributed free glass to the server and hid the glass panes anywhere and everywhere that had a container. And if you wanted to make this prank that extra little bit of evil, then you could always rename several of the glass panes so that they can't be stacked together. That way they're annoying to find and even more annoying to get rid of. Minecraft seems to go back and forth on whether it wants to mimic real life or not, but unfortunately for your friends, this is a time where it matched a little too well. And as we can see from this example, because of the change where Mojang made it so that parrots actually died when they're fed cookies, it meant that we had a new way to convince our friends that if you tame your parrots using cookies, it'll make them love you even more. All the while knowing that once they get fed one of those cookies, it's gonna be Chips Ahoy for the little guy. But hey, they learned an interesting real-world factoid. Ever since 1.17, copper's quickly become one of the community's favorite building blocks. But don't miss out on the opportunity if you see a fully waxed build, since all we would have to do in 1.17 is to walk up to your friend's house with an axe and take that perfectly aged copper house and remove it all down. Which, considering the textures weren't even different, they wouldn't even notice right away, since it will take a while for the copper to age. And if you're lucky, they might not even suspect that you did it, thinking instead that they just forgot to apply some honeycomb, which meant that we got to do this throughout all the different parts of the Caves and Cliffs update. One of the first pranks that we saw in Lifesteal SMP has become a bit of a classic. And of course, we're talking about the idea of the Curse of Binding Pumpkin, which works by enchanting a carved pumpkin with a Curse of Binding book and then placing it in a dispenser that we tuck away. And what Spectacle did here was hide the dispenser under the floor's pressure plate. However, they didn't actually put the pumpkin in the dispenser until after the target had already noticed the dispenser was full of fireworks. And once they thought it was safe, they actually swapped it over to the pumpkin, creating Lifesteal's first human golem. Did you know dispensers could place boats? Well, Green certainly did. And this gave way for him and the Bodum crew to make a giant boat bomb. By repeatedly placing boats with a redstone clock, he was able to stack an unreasonable amount of boats into one spot. And then, once the target comes along and tries to break what they think is only a couple of boats, the stack explodes in every direction. So if you ever needed a way to lag the server and create a Sisyphean task for your friends, the boat bomb's it. Another Minecraft update meant another Minecraft bomb, because with the release of 1.19, we got a new age of invisible bomb traps. And now skulk sensors became the new go-to method for player detection and turning your friends into a pile of items. And this only got stronger once the calibrated variant was added in 1.20. Now all your friend had to do was walk near the machine and TNT minecarts would rip through their armor and totems alike. People like pranking with wardens, but sometimes the shrieker's all that you need, if you have 50 of them. Since by gathering a bunch of skulk shriekers and hiding them under someone's floor, we could attach it to a skulk sensor and every shrieker will activate simultaneously, making a chorus of otherworldly screams that blast into the eardrums of your victim. And while they dig around and search for the source of the noise, the machine will constantly activate while they do, giving a telltale sound that's sure to drive them mad. The most upvoted prank of all time on Reddit actually happened on the PS3 edition of Minecraft, and it didn't use any redstone, since the user BabyfaceBlaster92, real name, was feeling a little bit of nostalgia and decided to explore their old Minecraft world, at which point they eventually came across a book labeled Read Me, and figured, why not? Who knows, maybe the book's filled with old memories, a message to an old friend, wishes for the future. No. Which I've gotta say, it takes real skill to get pranked in single player. Whenever we can build a new mob, it's usually an opportunity for a new prank. And so Xumavoid on Hermitcraft took that to heart with the creaking. And here he had several creaking heart structures underground at the site of someone's base. And what helps this work so well is that the trap is nearly undetectable until it triggers. And considering the creakings usually spawn on the surface, as long as there's no other spawnable space near the underground heart, then there's sure to be a whole lot of creakings up there keeping you distracted, making it impossible to reach the cluster of hearts underground. With the introduction of the happy ghast meant that we also had a new purpose for our unhappy ghasts. And the way to pull off this prank was to trap yourself a regular ghast from the nether and then wrangle it over into the overworld, which at that point we could replace your friend's happy ghast with the unhappy one. So then when your friend walks over to the ghast stable, they're gonna get a fireball instead of liftoff. You ever look at a bunch of copper blocks blocks and wonder if they were alive? Well, while the copper golem was meant to be an update to storage and item management, fortunately for us, it was also a huge step forward in the history of pranks. Because now, every copper block that was placed in a build, regardless of waxing or age, is a potential copper golem. And so, by just heading over to your friend's build with a bunch of carved pumpkins, we can start placing them down and giving them a whole bunch of new friends. And also a whole bunch of lag, too. While the old days of the Minecraft prank war might have faded from Minecraft's memory, I mean, it's been almost 15 years since the note block incident, but on September 5th of 2025, Vintage Beef released an all-new episode of Prank Wars on the Minecraft Rebirth server. And for this big occasion, he found a giant bed statue and built proportionally big giant bed bugs underneath it, which I think shows a great point that pranks aren't always about excessive death and destruction. Sometimes it's just about making your friends laugh. And while the methods might change, it's nice to see that part's still true to Minecraft's history. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?